YouTube. Uh, Andrew Miller and Shane Black from hook'emheadlines.com. Coming back at you today. First video in a few days. I've been feeling a little under the weather, so apologize for that. But before we jump in, I don't think I had mentioned it. Maybe I have in a past video and I'm just not remembering it, but we did cross the threshold since the last video we recorded of 200 subscribers. And I think at this point we're at like 230. So I think just hit the 50,000 video view mark. Everyone that's tuning in with us, definitely appreciate it. Whether you're coming from Hook'em Headlines, kind of the Twitter or Facebook space, or you're just finding us because you're a Longhorns or college sports fan. We appreciate kind of the rapid growth here in the last few months, and we will continue to do our best to get good content out there. Like I said, definitely going to be digging in more on college hoops and everything upcoming for the next few months, spring ball, all that good stuff. But today we are talking about the Texas-Tennessee game. The SEC Big 12 Challenge is coming up tomorrow because we're recording on the night of January 27th. Number 10 Texas set to face number 4 Tennessee. It is going to be a battle tomorrow. One of the most difficult games on Texas's schedule, just without a doubt. Looking into this, researching it. This is another game where I have a hard time finding a lot of positive things for Texas from a objective perspective, but I think that's what's going to make the game fun tomorrow, especially since it's on the road. Shane, what are some of your thoughts?
Yeah, if we would have thought back to the beginning of the season, what position you want to be in, I think Texas is in a pretty good one at the moment. 17-3 going into the Big 12 SEC Challenge, top 10 team. You got College Game Day going to Knoxville for this battle. That always makes it a little more fun. So, yeah, I think all in all, Texas, in general, is in a good position heading to the game. But like you mentioned, path to victory, the margin's going to be small, is how I'll put it. Especially playing in Knoxville, they got a very passionate and rabid basketball fan base that seemed to come out this season. And for the most part, besides that, weird Kentucky game about a week ago that I'm sure we'll get into, Tennessee's been pretty solid at home over, even the whole Rick Barnes era the past couple of seasons. But they also have that storyline in Rick Barnes facing Texas. We saw it last year. This time, Rodney Terry, who was an assistant for 9 years under Barnes. It's a little wrinkled storyline in there. But, yeah, I'm nervous for this one. I think it's probably the biggest test of the season since maybe we look back at it, revisionist history, Gonzaga might not be as good as we originally thought. So Tennessee could be, probably is the biggest test of the season so far. So I'm excited to kind of talk with you, pick through how we think Texas should attack what's one of the best defenses in the country, because I think there's a chance that this game could end up looking like one of those old Shaka Smart games where the Longhorns, are throwing up some bad shots and end up scoring 58 points and feeling pretty disappointed after.
This is, if I'm looking through the rest of the schedule, it is the hardest game remaining on Texas's regular season schedule because, I don't think there's really any huge road game that sticks out at this point with, Kansas kind of falling by the wayside lately. I think every road game in the Big 12 is winnable for Texas. And this one looks tough, both from a matchup perspective and from just an environment perspective. You mentioned College Game Day is going to be there. Forgot to mention that at the outset, but Tennessee is a team that is playing really, really, really good basketball at home this season. And the teams that have beaten Tennessee, and we'll get into this in a little bit, but the teams that have beaten Tennessee have some strengths that aren't the same matchup advantages that Texas brings to the table. I still think this is a game that Texas can win, but they're going to have to play probably their best game of the season to do so. So, before we go too deep into the Tennessee game, I do want to backtrack a little bit and kind of talk about both teams coming into this one. Excuse me. Texas is coming off 2 straight wins, albeit neither one overwhelmingly difficult opponents. Both coming at, because I believe the last 2 both coming at home. Yeah.
In Morgantown.
Oh, sorry, Morgantown. My mind was going back to Texas Tech. Yeah. So I did. Yeah, okay. The Morgantown win was a pretty impressive one, just from the perspective of getting an 8-point Big 12 win on the road. I don't think there's really any team in the Big 12 that you can discount that sort of performance. So, from that perspective, yes, that one was big. Beating Oklahoma State by double digits at home, though, is something that some of the better teams in the Big 12 are doing anyway this season. So, I'm not putting a ton of stock into that. That's kind of where I thought that game was going to end up, like a 13 or 14-point margin. So, I think I maybe said 12 for the prediction, but I really like the fact that like Texas is heading into this game with some more momentum on offense. You know, they closed out strong against West Virginia despite kind of some unforeseen circumstances, a bad foul on Marcus Carr, Dylan Dessou fouling out, Timmy Allen getting limited, those sort of things. Still managed to scrounge up nearly 70 points on the road, and then had what I thought was like a damn near perfect game execution wise on offense against Oklahoma State, considering how much of a mud pit Oklahoma State usually drags you down into. Being able to put up 90 points against them, and that was one of Texas's best like shooting games in the Big 12 this season. And from those perspectives, like Texas going in averaging around 80 points per game in the last two is encouraging to me. And so even the Iowa State game, they played decently on the offensive end. That's something that they're going to need against Tennessee. On the Tennessee side of things, man, they've been beaten up on some teams in the SEC. They're coming off a 29-point win over Georgia. Really, their only slip up in the SEC so far, I think you mentioned it, was the loss to Kentucky, where Tennessee just wasn't able to make that many shots, and they were getting beat on the glass. So, but Oscar Tshiebwe does that to pretty much everyone. Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm steering the conversation this way. Like, how do you feel about the way Texas is playing lately compared to Tennessee? Or do you think that's going to have any impact on this game at all, considering?
Yeah, so I think a positive, last two games for Texas. Those are games that if you want to compete for a Big 12 title, you got to win. You mentioned every road game on the schedule is going to be tough, but you got to win some road games if you want to get above 500. And Morgantown's one that feasibly seems like a place where you can go in and win. And I think Texas, like we've seen all year, was able to close the game strong. Same with Oklahoma State, kind of turned into a foul fest at the end, but the offense from the outset was, didn't really let Oklahoma State bother them. So I think that's a really telling sign heading into Tennessee, because what the Volunteers like to do is, really bother the hell out of you on the offensive end of the floor. They like to kind of push you out to 30 feet. Don't let you get in your sets. By the time you look up at the shot clock, it's in the single digits, and you really haven't run anything but a couple of ball swings. So for Texas to have that kind of offensive output against a good Oklahoma State defense, I think is very encouraging. As for the Tennessee side, Tennessee and Alabama are two of the best teams in the country. But besides that, the SEC is pretty weak this year. So, they've just kind of handled their business. And I think that's kind of what I would expect from a team of this caliber. I think it's always a good thing, that they handled their business in the couple games prior, because you don't want to kind of got spurned, maybe upset, or played a close game, because then they're really going to be on it the next game. So them coming in, having beaten Georgia by 29 and LSU by 21, I think gives Texas, is like a little feather in the cap for Texas, that this is not maybe a super hungry team right now. I know Rick Barnes always has his teams ready to go, especially for this game. But, it's not like they're coming right off that loss from Kentucky, which was pretty inexcusable at home. So I think both teams are trending in the right direction. These are teams that are probably going to earn top 3 seeds in the NCAA tournament. And it's going to be an interesting jockeying game to see kind of how they square up against each other, because, potentially when filling out brackets, we could see this rematch in an Elite Eight or Final Four.
Yeah, that I do agree with. Just both these teams have enough depth and enough experience, and are definitely good enough to make a long run come March and April. Yeah, I do think it's interesting just to think about the perspective of, okay, Tennessee had, I know they're going to talk about this a lot tomorrow, but Tennessee had a 1-point loss against Texas last year in Austin. And I mean, Rick Barnes hasn't beaten. Actually, the last time that Tennessee beat Texas was when Rick Barnes was still the head coach at Texas in like the mid 2000s. So I do wonder, with all these players coming back for Tennessee this season, Vescovi, Ziegler, guys like that lost to Texas last season. I mean, is that providing an extra chip on the shoulder here? Or, how does that play in? And again, yeah, I mean, you mentioned that Rodney Terry was an assistant for a long time in the 2000s and a little bit for the early 2010s. I think that was just in 2010 that he was an assistant under Rick Barnes. But how much does that play in? Does he feel like he knows how Rodney Terry's going to coach this up? So from that perspective, I think it's definitely going to be interesting. But, I think the overarching storyline in this game is like, and again, something that they're going to talk about a lot tomorrow is, Texas, #1 offensive team in the Big 12. How does that translate against the #1 defensive team in the country? So I think that's going to be the really interesting thing to break down here, and something we'll talk about further in this video.
Yeah, I mean, we can get right into it. I think Texas, if they turn into a half-court game, they're going to get beat, and they could get whooped by 15-plus points. If Tennessee's going to try to stagnate the Longhorns and force them to slow it down, and like I said, you look up and there's 8 seconds left on the shot clock. We've seen Texas run pretty well this year. Andrew's documented it well on Twitter over at the Hook'em Headlines account. Marcus Carr, one of the most effective transition players in not only the Big 12 but the nation. And I think that's going to be vital in Knoxville because, like I said, Tennessee really good at disrupting passing lanes, disrupting any sort of offensive flow you want to get into. So any sort of 3 points Texas can steal is going to be massive, whether that's, a couple layups, dunks off of fast break opportunities, getting to the line, anything like that. Texas is going to have to be the better team if they want to come out on top. I know off air, Andrew, you mentioned, I don't know if you included this in an article or anything, but that one of the commonalities between the 3 teams that beat Tennessee this year was that they all attempted 20-plus free throws. I think that's huge for Texas because, like I just said, stealing 3 points is massive against the Tennessee defense that is #1 in points per game, #1 in effective field goal percentage. Like every shot you take and hopefully make is going to be a tough one. There's really no easy looks in this offense. So for Texas to get to the line is going to be crucial. Luckily, we've seen them, actually get to the line at a pretty solid clip over the past couple weeks. And when they do get there, they're one of the best teams in the Big 12 at knocking down free throws. So that is somewhere that I look is going to be transition and free throws is really where Texas can make their hay and kind of force this game into the 70s, where I think Coach Terry and the Longhorns will feel a little more comfortable.
Yeah, I mean, free throw shooting, it was something that played a huge role in multiple Big 12 wins so far, and I think can do so again against Tennessee. Yeah, I guess the number you were bringing up there, I mentioned it in an article today, that when Tennessee allows an opponent to have at least 20 free throw attempts and gets beat in the battle on the boards, doesn't matter by how much. If they just get beat in that area, they are 0-3. That includes the loss to Colorado, which I'm not putting a ton of stock into at this point because I think that was just all around Tennessee's worst game of the season so far. But I mean, there's a lot of credence to the losses that they had to Kentucky and Arizona. Tennessee was having a slow day offensively against Kentucky, but they've had a lot of slow days offensively this season. It almost cost them a couple weeks ago against Ole Miss on the road. They had a 4-point win. And so free throw shooting is going to be a big part of this game because Tennessee is a little bit of an offensively challenged team, especially for being a top 5 team in the country. They don't have one guy that kind of sticks out as like a huge offensive threat. Vescovi is someone that can go off at any point. He is a good shooter. Zakai Ziegler, he can create. I think he's leading them in scoring around 12 points per game. But they have, I think it's 3 or 4 guys that are all scoring the double figures that are all within like 2 points of each other for leading the team in points per game. So it's, Texas, Texas has got like a difficult challenge on their hands just in terms of like, I won't say being able to keep up with Tennessee, but you've got to find a way to, I know this is super obvious, but you got to find a way to be able to outscore Tennessee. And we talked about the free throw shooting aspect of this, whether it's that Marcus Card getting out in transition, which I'll talk about this later, but I don't love the idea of just trying to rely on the transition game for a couple of reasons. The other thing that I would say that, you know, could potentially be something that Texas can rely on is utilizing Timmy Allen. I like his potential in this game. What did he have like 8 free throw attempts against Oklahoma State? It was something like that, I thought.
Yeah, he was getting a lot. Whether it was attacking, got fouled on a couple jump shots as well.
Yeah, he was, and he hit like, I think it was 7 of 8, which is a season high for him. And so he's someone that can exploit a lot of what Tennessee does well, but not extremely well. I say that because they're pretty much strong on all areas of their defense. But in terms of play tracking, 2 of the plays that they are worst at defending is off-ball cuts and runners down the lane. What can Timmy Allen do for Texas from the elbow, or, you know, maybe even from just inside the 3-point arc from the corner? He can facilitate the offense. And you can get someone maybe like a Tyrese Hunter or Marcus Carr or Serge Barty Rice moving off ball. Dylan Dessou. I mean, Texas has a lot of guys that should be capable of moving well off ball. And, you know, that's something that Arizona was doing pretty well. Was, you know, even if it was late in the shot clock, they were finding someone usually within the 2-point arc, because Tennessee defends the 3 ball so well and they're so disruptive, especially when you're trying to pass from a distance. Longer passes just are kind of a death sentence against Tennessee. But yeah, I mean, I think if you can get someone like Timmy Allen in a spot where he can maybe get 4 or 5 assists in this game, you can get kind of the off-ball movement going, and along with that, maybe get him trying to get his mid-range game going and draw some contact. That'll be another way to get to the free throw line. I think there's a lot of ways that you can utilize Timmy Allen here, that at least in like some of the areas where you can beat Tennessee more than others, I think that's where you have to get it done. Again, there's no perfect way to beat them, but you just have to find these areas where you can pick up, you know, where you can pick up some extra points. I think, how many possessions do you think Texas ends up coming away with in this game? Because Tennessee doesn't play at a super high or super fast pace.
Yeah, I mean, if you can get to like 65, 67, something like that, does that seem a little high? I mean,
no, actually, I think it's 67 per game that Tennessee is averaging.
Yeah,
they're not
I think ideally Texas is a little above what they're averaging. I mean, I'm curious actually to see what you mentioned, something about transition numbers that you didn't like. I'm curious to what that was.
It's not even the transition numbers necessarily. I mean, it is. Tennessee allows like 5.5 or 6 points per game in transition, which is in the top percentile of any team in the country. Part of that is because they're so disciplined defensively. They're not going to try to press you full court. They're going to try to press you once you reach the half court and then work from there. And they also don't turn the ball over a ton, so it doesn't create a whole lot of transition opportunities. Maybe this is just the game for someone like Marcus Carr, Tyrese Hunter defensively. You know, Marcus Carr's been good on defense this season, steal percentage around 2.5, which is pretty solid. But I don't think this is necessarily the game to rely on transition or fast break points, because I don't know how chaotic that this is going to get. If it does, I'll eat my words. If it becomes a transition game, that's definitely going to favor Texas. And I mean, yeah, I would love to see that playing into Texas's hands. I just don't think it's going to happen from a numbers standpoint and a matchup standpoint. I know I'm really dull right now when I'm talking about this sort of thing. It feels like the Iowa State game.
Yeah, I mean, Tennessee doesn't seem to send a lot of guys to the offensive glass. So, I mean, they're going to be in position to get back on missed shots. Like, they're not crashing their guards. I mean, Vescovy, it just kind of roams the perimeter. And even if he wanted to, Zakai Ziegler couldn't really get in there on the offensive board. So they're always going to have a couple guys back. So I think that's kind of why their transition defense has been so solid. But, yeah, I mean, I think we agree with the sentiment that Texas should look to run, and that is definitely a way they can find success. It's just going to be hard.
Yeah. The point I'm trying to get to, like, I think that it's just like the flow of the game. If Texas tries to, you can't really have any wasted possessions against Tennessee either. I think there's a fine line you can walk here. I'm not saying to not try to run in transition or try to get the fast break going. But what I'm trying to say is, like, you kind of have to walk that fine line between wasting possessions and, like, actually exploiting a potential matchup advantage. Because, like, I think we saw last year against, against multiple teams, but, you know, when Texas was having such long scoring droughts, like, I'll look to the Purdue game, for instance. I know that, like, transition was not Texas's issue there. It was size. But Texas started getting all out of sorts. They didn't really have a plan offensively. And you started to see Marcus Carr taking a lot of bad shots and, I mean, a lot of guys committing some bad turnovers. And I don't want Texas to start getting in the mindset where it's like, okay, we have to get off fast shots because that's going to be the best way to score against Tennessee. Again, I'll jump back to the number of possessions that I would like Texas to have, and I think it's in the ballpark of 70 to 75 because I think that's right around Texas's sweet spot this season. And that's going to give you enough opportunity to get to, like, I think you need to get to, like, the 65-point mark for you to say, like, okay, I feel good about Texas potentially winning this game. And, you know, Tennessee is letting up this season. It's like 0.85 points per possession. So, I mean, even if you're above average against a team, so you have two really difficult tasks to accomplish there in terms of, like, just from a numbers perspective. If you're trying to get 5 to 10 more possessions than they're allowing per game already, and you're trying to get more points per possession, which against a team as defensively stout as Tennessee, and some teams that are a team that, like, guards the perimeter as well as Tennessee does, that's where I get a little hesitant on the whole, like, just trying to play at a really fast tempo or up tempo or trying to get out and run a lot.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, just because you're pushing the pace doesn't mean that, you know, like, you're succeeding. A lot of time, I mean, we've seen it kind of with Tyrese Hunter. He is not as great of a finisher as I would have, as I would like, or I would have expected. And, you know, sometimes if it's a 2-on-2 fast break, sometimes you just want to pull that ball out and set up your offense. So I get what you're saying. One other note I'd make on the offensive, you mentioned, you know, Tennessee is very adept at forcing turnovers, especially when you try to make skip passes or through their defense. They have some lengthy guys in the back line that can get their hands in the way. I think also Texas is going to want to avoid, you know, just dribbling the air out of the ball. Marcus Carr is going to have to hit some, you know, savior shots at the end of shot clocks just to bail Texas out a couple of times. But I think for the most part, you're going to want to move the ball with quick, deliberate passes, moving the defense side to side. And, you know, if you can swing it from side to side 3 times and the defense still might not open up, but it's that 4th or 5th time that it's gonna open. It's that, you know, 6th or 7th possession that back cut might be open. So I think it's important that Texas kind of sticks to the game plan and isn't just running through the motions, but is making cuts, you know, with authority, looking to score, looking to get open, because Tennessee isn't a team you're going to easily lull to sleep. It's going to take, you know, a lot of consistent effort. So I think Texas is going to, you know, have to make some tough shots, but I think there are ways if they can deliberately move the ball around the perimeter, get it to the high post, like you were mentioning, to a Timmy Allen. I've liked Brock Cunningham in that spot too. He's able to pop out to the top of the key. Seems to be a sweet spot from knocking down the 3 as well. So, yeah, if Texas is deliberate on the offensive end, I think there's a way that, you know, they can score in the 60s, possibly 70s, which would be a great omen not an omen, but if you can get to that number, that's something I think Coach Terry would be happy with.
Yeah, I mean, like if you could score in the 70s, I feel great about where Texas is at. Like, do I think that scoring in the 70s is possible here? Yeah, I definitely do. I think there's one thing that I don't necessarily want to overlook for Texas that really could be a nice advantage. We'll see. Tennessee on the season has been pretty good at defending the mid range. Like if you look at it as a whole, but if you start breaking it down more specifically to the zones that they defend well in the mid range, you start to find areas you can pick apart a little bit. Behind the free throw line, basically anything from the elbow and up, Tennessee is allowing teams to shoot around 33, 34% in the last 2 months, which sounds like a really low percentage, but that actually is like around like the average in the SEC. And Texas is so far above average in terms of their mid-range shooting ability. I posted a tweet the other day. Texas had like 3 or 4 guys in the I don't know if that was just the Oklahoma State game or if that even goes back further, but yeah, Texas had like 3 or 4 guys that were all shooting above 50% from the mid-range. Dylan Dessou has turned in. I posted a tweet about his shot chart. He's turned into a mid-range killer lately, man. That top of the key jumper from the free throw line. He's been money on that. I mean, Marcus Carr's been money on the mid-range all season long, and Timmy Allen. I mean, yeah, his mid-range game was up and down the stretch last season, but he started to find that part of his game again. That's always been a strength of his, or at least like a key part to his game. And so, like the mid-range can kind of low-key be an area where Texas can succeed. The only thing I would give some pushback to there is like I think Texas does need to draw some contact to get to the free throw line, which would mean probably going down the lane and getting to the rim more often. And there's one play that I really feel like Texas can, or 2 guys that I really feel like Texas can get going there. And one is, Marcus Carr. I mentioned that Tennessee actually doesn't defend the runners super well. I think that's just from like an athleticism standpoint that, yeah, I mean, Tennessee, they defend the ball really well, but they're not the most athletic team in the SEC by any means. I think that is one way that you can take advantage of getting him down the lane. But I mean, hey, I said it earlier. I think Timmy Allen can really play a big role in this game if you want to get the mid-range game going. Sorry, I mentioned a lot about mid-range there. That's some fundamental basketball talk. I think that's an area that Texas can actually exploit a little bit. It's one of those things, like I said, it's hard to find those matchup advantages against Tennessee. It really is. But, I mean, had some hot shooters lately. And, man, if you have a spot where you can potentially get a leg up on the Vols on that end of the floor, you take it.
Yeah, no, I agree. You got to look for any advantage you can, and I don't know how effective Texas is going to be at the rim. If you look at the matchup with Dylan Dessou and Christian Bishop against Uros Plavsic, they're just giving up so much size. Plavsic is 7 feet, like a little over 260. So Bishop and Dessou, 40 pounds. They're not the greatest back to the basket scores to begin with. And when you're giving up that much size, I don't expect them to find a ton of success. But Plavsic he's a big guy. He doesn't move his feet that well. So if Dessou's able to kind of bring him out to 18 feet and kind of work from there, that would be definitely a huge advantage for Texas.
Yeah, I mean, Dessou has really proven just that, like, he's a good shooter wherever he's focused on. Like, I was kind of going back to look at some research just to put it simply. Like, the year he had a career year at Vanderbilt from 3-point range, that was a huge part of his offseason routine. And it seems like the way that Texas has molded his game now, that he's more of like a threat from within about 12 feet from the basket, maybe 18 feet. And that's okay. I mean, whatever way it is your best way to score, go for it. I mean, I think Dessou is another guy that can get to the free throw line, but on the opposite end of that, like he's got to stay out of foul trouble because that's been a bugaboo lately for him. He's kind of lived in that 4 to 5 personal foul range for the last couple of weeks. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned too the size that Tennessee has down low. They're a really, really good inside scoring team. That's the last place I really wanted to take this from like a matchup perspective. And to put it simply, I don't think it's a good idea for Texas to play the inside game in this one. I mean, if you like Texas, one thing they did really well against Gonzaga was being able to send like well-timed double teams against Drew Timme. And I think like I know that was probably a different type of game planning that Texas is doing now, but if you're going to take a page out of the playbook from that, or like at least some sort of concept, I think well-timed double teams, anything that you can really do to prevent Tennessee from scoring at the rim. They're shooting like 32% from 3 this season. So if you want to let them have, especially the corner threes, they are not good at hitting those. It's like 28% on the season. So that's where I think make Tennessee play from the outside in.
Yeah, I mean, Plavsic isn't like he's a guy who I am a little nervous about just because I think he can bully our big guys in the paint. What you're gonna have to do is force his catch out to 8 feet. If he catches the ball 5 feet from the rim, he's just gonna go over each shoulder and hit hook shots for days. He was able to do that against Kentucky, and he had almost 20 points. So it'll be interesting to see how Texas guards him because, yeah, like I said, if he catches it that close to the rim, he's a guy who could, score 15 to 20 points. If you're able to push him out, he's not going to be as effective. I mean, he's only averaging 6 points a game this season. So, but he is an X factor just because, we've discussed all offseason Texas kind of needed like a big center rim protector that we really didn't get. Terry's been able to navigate it pretty well through Big 12 play with Bishop and Dessou and, a little Dylan Mitchell. But Plavsic is a whole different animal at 7 foot, 260 pounds. So I think forcing his catch to even 8 feet, he's not super comfortable at that range. So I think that's going to be big. Anytime he gets a foot in the lane, which, again, it's exactly what they did against Timme. Once 1 foot got in the lane, they sent the double. I'd almost like to see the same thing happen on Plavsic because, like you mentioned, Tennessee's not the most adept at shooting from deep, which is a little surprising to me because I was super high on Vescovi in the offseason, but he was over 40% last year. He's down to about 35% from 3 this year. So make Plavsic have to pass out, which, he's not that great of a passer, and Tennessee have to knock down a 3 because you don't want to get beat on him just going left hook, right hook, left hook, right hook.
Yeah, I mean, that's very true. They just don't, I mean, they don't, it's Rick Barnes. Like, I know that if you're a long time, like, defensively game planning, you should be able to have some set plays and even some interesting kind of like blitzing style double teams down low that I think could be pretty effective. You bring up a good point though of like the way that you can the way that you can time the double teams to get Plavsic to pass the ball out back to the perimeter. Maybe that's something that can open up the transition game.
Yeah. I mean, I mentioned it at the top. It's a game, for Texas, it's going to be pretty small margin with the game plan and how they're going to have to execute. I mean, if you tell me Tennessee it's 12 threes, I'm going to watch this game just to watch it to see what Texas can improve on. Like there are certain numbers where it's like if Texas only attempts 8 free throws, okay, they're not going to win. Tennessee it's 12 threes, they're not going to win. If Vescovi scores 25, they're not going to win. So there's like some margins here where Texas has to have a lot of things kind of go their way, but this is kind of what you kind of get up for and why we watch and why we cover the team is for top 10 matchups like this, and you really get to test yourself. Worst comes to worst, you lose against a team that's going to be a 1 or 2 seed in come March, so not a bad thing at all.
True, yeah. So I'll start that or use this as a transition point. So I'll give my bold prediction, and then I'll pass it over to you for yours, and then score prediction. Then I'll do my score prediction because I got to think about it for a second. My bold prediction for this one is going to be that Dylan Dessou hits 2 3-pointers and leads Texas in points. I think that he's going to be able to draw some of those Tennessee bigs away from the basket, mainly Plavsic.
I like that. I think that's solid. I'm gonna go with, I think Tyrese Hunter leads Texas in points and creeps up towards the 20 mark. I like the way he's been trending. Or do we know before I actually go on record, do we know like his status? Is he going to be kind of ready to rock and roll? I saw he tweeted earlier this week, like, just wait, I'm coming back healthy. You think that means like he's back healthy now?
I don't know. I'll be honest. I did some digging for that yesterday.
Yeah, this might be wishful thinking, but I liked how he came out against Iowa State, and I like how he played on the road against West Virginia. He seems like a guy who kind of, embraces road environments. Looking at it right now, he had 5 both of Oklahoma and Oklahoma State. So this also could be my view of him coming into. But I think we're in store for Tyrese Hunter to have a big game. If Ziegler's guarding him, you could maybe pick on Ziegler's size a little bit. But yeah, I think the prediction I'm more. The bold prediction I'm more kind of confident about is on the Tennessee side. I think Santiago Vescovi is going to have a big game.
He has been playing some pretty good basketball lately. I think that's a good bold prediction. Okay, I think I've got my score. I'm going to go Tennessee wins 65-61.
I am at the 67, Texas 58.
Oh, okay. I've been the more optimistic one of us two lately, which is weird.
Yeah, that is funny.
Okay. Well, you're probably going to notice at the end here us kind of skipping around a little bit just to try to cut down the video time. But if you're still with us here at the very end, like I said, happy for kind of the growth we've had on this channel, to say the very least. And thank you to everyone that has subscribed and, kind of been with us here for the last few months. But anyway, for Shane Black, Andrew Miller, Headlines, that's pretty much it. Welcome.